Salesforce Developer Interview Questions. Question 1. What is Apex? Apex is the in-house technology of Salesforce.com, similar to Java programming with object-oriented concepts, used for writing custom logic. Question 2. What is an S-control? An S-control is a Salesforce widget predominantly based on JavaScript. These widgets are hosted by Salesforce but executed on the client side. It's worth noting that S-controls have been largely replaced by Visualforce in modern Salesforce development. Question 3. What is a Visualforce page? A Visualforce page is a component in Salesforce used to create custom user interfaces. It uses a markup language that allows for defining how data is displayed and styled. HTML can also be used within Visualforce, and custom controllers can be associated with these pages to handle business logic. Question 4. Does Visualforce support merge fields like S-controls? Yes, just like S-controls, Visualforce pages support embedded merge fields. You can use merge fields to dynamically populate data on the page. Question 5. Where can you write Visualforce code? You can write Visualforce code in 3 main ways. In Salesforce Setup, go to App Setup, Develop, and Pages to create a new Visualforce page. Enable development mode in your personal settings. Run a Visualforce page in development mode, and you'll find a page editor at the bottom to write the page and its associated controller. Use the Eclipse IDE to create Visualforce pages and write the code. Question 6. What are Apex governor limits? Apex governor limits are runtime restrictions enforced by Salesforce to prevent code from consuming too many shared resources in a multi-tenant environment. These limits include constraints on memory usage, database resources, the number of script statements, and the number of records processed. Exceeding these limits results in runtime exceptions. Question 7. How do you create and host an S-control in Salesforce? To create and host an S-control in Salesforce, navigate to Setup and go to App Setup, Develop, and S-controls. Create a new S-control by clicking New S-control. Define the S-control's attributes, including its name and content, typically contain JavaScript code. Save the S-control. You can use S-controls in various Salesforce areas like home pages or custom buttons. However, Visualforce largely replaces them in modern development. Question 8. What is the difference between a sandbox and a development environment? A sandbox is a copy of your Salesforce production environment used for testing and development. The key difference is that development environments, often referred to as developer orgs, are fresh Salesforce instances used for initial development, while sandboxes are copies of your production environment for testing changes and configurations before deploying them to production. Question 9. How can you schedule exports or backups of Salesforce data? To schedule exports or backups of Salesforce data, you can use tools like Data Export or Data Loader. Data Export allows you to schedule automatic backups of your data, while Data Loader can be used with scheduled tasks or scripts to automate data exports. Question 10. Do governor limits apply to sandbox instances in Salesforce? Yes, governor limits apply to both production and sandbox instances in Salesforce. Salesforce enforces these limits to ensure fair resource usage and prevent code from monopolizing shared resources. Question 11. What is the difference between isNull and isBlank in Salesforce? In Salesforce, isNull is used with fields of type lookup. It checks if a lookup field is empty or does not reference any record. isBlank, on the other hand, is used with other field types, like text fields, to check if they are empty or contain no value. Question 12. Is it possible to write Apex code from the user interface in Salesforce? No, you cannot write Apex code directly from the Salesforce user interface. Apex code must be written in development environments, such as developer orgs or sandboxes, using tools like the Developer Console or an integrated development environment, IDE. Question 13. When can't you add a time-dependent action in a workflow rule in Salesforce? You cannot add a time-dependent action if the workflow rule evaluation criteria are set to every time a record is created or edited. Time-dependent actions are only available when the rule is set to created or created, and every time it's edited. Question 14. What are the types of email templates available in Salesforce? Salesforce offers 3 types of email templates: text, HTML, and Visualforce. Text templates are plain text, HTML templates support HTML formatting, and Visualforce templates allow for complex customization using the Visualforce markup language. Question 15. What are the different Salesforce.com editions and their limits? Salesforce offers various editions, each with its own set of features and limits. The most common editions include Essentials, Professional, Enterprise, and Unlimited, with varying limits on users, custom objects, and more. You can refer to Salesforce documentation for specific details on each edition's limits. Question 16. What is a roll-up summary field in Salesforce? A roll-up summary field is a custom field in Salesforce that displays a value based on the summarized values of related records. It's commonly used to calculate totals, counts, or other aggregations from child records to parent records in a master detail relationship. Question 17. What happens if an account is deleted in Salesforce? When an account is deleted in Salesforce, all associated records, such as contacts, opportunities, and related custom objects, may also be deleted based on your data retention settings. This action can have cascading effects, so it should be done with caution. Question 18. How many types of relationship fields are available in Salesforce? Salesforce supports 3 main types of relationship fields: lookup relationship, master detail relationship, and external lookup relationship. Each type serves different purposes and has its own characteristics. Question 19. How can you create many-to-many relationships between objects in Salesforce? Many-to-many relationships are typically modeled using a junction object. You create 2 master detail or lookup relationships between your objects and introduce a junction object to link the records, allowing for many-to-many relationships. Question 20. In which sequence do triggers and automation rules run in Salesforce? And how can you answer this in a simple way? In Salesforce, triggers run before automation rules. Triggers are custom pieces of code executed when records are inserted, updated, or deleted. Automation rules, like workflows and process builder, operate after the record changes are saved, making it easier to explain the sequence of execution. Question 21. If one object in Salesforce has 2 triggers that run before insert, is there any way to control the sequence of execution of these triggers? Yes, you can control the order of trigger execution by using trigger frameworks or handler classes. These frameworks allow you to specify the order in which triggers should run, ensuring predictable execution. Question 22. How to delete a user from Salesforce? In Salesforce, you cannot permanently delete a user or their associated data. Salesforce retains user records for auditing and data integrity reasons. The delete option is typically used for non-user records, such as leads, accounts, and contacts, but not for user records. To manage user access, you would generally deactivate a user instead of deleting them. Deactivating a user prevents them from accessing Salesforce while keeping their records intact. Question 23. How to delete a user's data from Salesforce? To delete a user's data, you can use the Mass Delete Records feature in Salesforce. First, go to Setup, then find Data Management, and select Mass Delete Records. After that, choose the specific objects, like accounts or leads, and set the criteria to match the user's name. Review the records and proceed to delete them. Please note that this action removes data related to the user while retaining the user record itself, as users cannot be permanently deleted in Salesforce. Question 24. How to restrict a user from viewing any record, such as opportunities? You can achieve this by setting up opportunity sharing to be private. However, if both users are administrators or have the View All Records permission on opportunities, that permission will override the private sharing settings. Question 25. What is the difference between trigger.new and trigger.old in Apex, SFDC? In Apex, trigger.new represents the new values of records that are about to be saved, typically used in before triggers. Trigger.old represents the old values of records before the update, useful for comparisons. These allow you to work with data changes during trigger execution. Question 26. How can you ensure that a trigger fires only once? Triggers typically fire twice, once before workflows and once after workflows. However, if nothing needs to be updated, e.g., the fields have already been set to a value, the triggers won't fire again. This behavior is a part of Salesforce's standard process to avoid unnecessary trigger execution. Question 27. Can you explain the difference between who ID and what ID in the data model of a task in Salesforce? In Salesforce, who ID is used for individuals, like lead ID or contact ID, while what ID is used for objects, such as account ID or opportunity ID. It helps determine who the task is related to and what it's related to in a straightforward way. Question 28. Where can you find the option for generating reports on custom objects with related objects, and what conditions are required for generating such related reports? If the parent object is a standard Salesforce object like account or contact, you'll find the report in their section with related custom objects. If both objects are custom, the report will be in the Other Reports section. To generate related reports, conditions include enabling reports on both objects and having a master-detail relationship between them. Question 29. How can you provide user login authentication in public sites created by Salesforce? You can implement user login on public sites using Customer Portal. It's a dynamic Apex feature in Salesforce that facilitates user authentication. Question 30. What is Dynamic Apex? Dynamic Apex allows developers to create more flexible applications by providing the ability to access objects and field-described information, write dynamic SOQL and SOSL queries, and perform dynamic DML operations. Question 31. How to get the list of all available subject in Salesforce database using Apex, Dynamic Apex. Map, string, schema. S-object type, S-object types equals schema. Get global describe. This code uses the schema get global describe method to retrieve a map where the keys are the API names of all available S-objects, and the values are their corresponding schema, S-object type. This map provides a comprehensive list of all S-objects in the Salesforce database, making it available for dynamic manipulation and access in your Apex code. Question 32. How can you dynamically retrieve all the required fields of an subject in Salesforce? While there isn't a direct property in Apex's dynamic API to represent required fields, you can identify them by checking for specific properties. If a field is creatable, not nillable, and doesn't have a default value, it is considered mandatory or required. You can use the schema class to access the field properties and iterate through the fields of the subject to determine which ones meet these criteria. Question 33. What is the controller extension? Controller extension in Salesforce is an Apex class with a public constructor that takes a custom controller or standard controller object as its single argument. Question 34. Explain the need or importance of the controller extension. Controller extensions are essential for extending the functionality of existing custom or standard controllers in Visualforce. They allow us to add specific logic to a page without modifying the primary controller, making code more modular and maintainable. Question 35. How to read the parameter value from the URL in Apex. To read a parameter from the URL in Apex, you can use the following code. String record type equals Apex pages. Current page. Get parameters. .get record type. Question 35. What is master detail relationship and lookup relationship in Salesforce? Master detail relationship represents a parent-child relationship, where if the parent is deleted, the child records are also deleted. Roll-up summary fields can be created on the master records. Lookup relationship is a has-a relationship, where one record has a reference to other records, and the deletion of one record doesn't affect the other. Question 36. Can we convert the lookup relationship to master detail relationship? You can convert a lookup relationship to a master detail relationship only if all existing records have valid lookup field references. Question 37. In how many ways can we invoke the Apex class? Apex classes can be invoked through Visualforce pages, triggers, web services, and email services. Question 38. Can we create master detail relationship on existing records? No, you can't create a master detail relationship on existing records directly. You first need to create a lookup relationship, populate valid values for the lookup field on all existing records, and then convert it to a master detail relationship. Question 39. How are validation rules executed, and are they page layout, Visualforce dependent? Validation rules run at the data model level and are not dependent on page layouts or Visualforce. They apply to records during any data saving operation in Salesforce. Question 40. What is the scope of a static variable? A static variable in Apex is initialized only once when the class is loaded. It is not transmitted as part of the view state for Visualforce pages and has request-level scope, not server-wide or organization-wide scope. Question 41. Difference in render, re-render, and renderers attributes of Visualforce? Render. It is similar to the display property in CSS and is used to show or hide an element. Re-render. This attribute specifies which component should be refreshed after an AJAX operation. It is available on elements like command link, command button, and action support. Render as. It determines how the page should be rendered, whether as PDF, Word, or Excel. Question 42. What is a scheduler class in Apex? A scheduler class in Apex is designed to run at predefined intervals. The class must implement the schedulable interface and include an execute method. Two ways to invoke a scheduler are using the UI or system schedule. When you implement schedulable, you can schedule the class to run periodically. To monitor scheduled jobs, you can go to Monitoring, Scheduled Jobs. Question 43. What is the difference between external ID and unique ID? External ID is a field that typically references an ID from an external system and allows for referencing records in Salesforce from that external system. It's used in upsert operations. Unique ID is a field property that enforces uniqueness within Salesforce, preventing the use of the same value in multiple records. Often, external IDs are made unique to ensure they are unique within Salesforce. External IDs are often used for integration purposes, while unique IDs enforce uniqueness within Salesforce itself. Question 44. How to get the picklist value in Apex class? You can use dynamic Apex by calling getDescribe on the object with the picklist field. Then, use getPicklistValues to retrieve the picklist values. Iterate over the results and create a list. Bind this list to unless than Apex. Select options greater than element to display picklist values in your Visualforce page. Question 45. What are the types of controllers in Visualforce? There are two types of controllers in Visualforce: standard controller, custom controller. Question 46. How many controllers can be used on a single VF page? Only one primary controller can be used on a single Visualforce page. However, you can use multiple controller extensions, custom controllers, on the same page by specifying them in the extensions attribute. If multiple controller extensions have methods with the same name, the method from the first specified extension will be executed. Question 47. What is the purpose of system runas in Salesforce testing? System.runAs is a method used in Salesforce testing to simulate different user contexts. In Salesforce, most code runs in system mode, ignoring user-specific permissions and record sharing. System.runAs allows us to temporarily switch to a specific user's context during testing. This is essential for testing scenarios involving user permissions and record access, ensuring that the code behaves correctly under various user conditions. Question 48. What are custom settings in Salesforce, and how are they used? Custom settings in Salesforce are a way to store custom data that can be utilized across the organization. They are similar to custom objects but serve a different purpose. Custom settings enable developers to create and manage custom data associated with an organization, specific profiles, or individual users. This data can be accessed and used in various parts of the Salesforce platform, such as formula fields, validation rules, Apex code, and the API. Question 49. What are the two types of custom settings in Salesforce, and how do they differ? There are two main types of custom settings in Salesforce. List custom settings. These provide a reusable set of static data accessible organization-wide. They are ideal for frequently used data like state abbreviations or product catalog numbers. Hierarchy custom settings. These use a hierarchical logic to personalize settings for specific profiles or users. They check the organization, profile, and user settings to return the most specific value. Question 50. What are the key differences between SOSL and SOQL in Salesforce? SOSL, Salesforce Object Search Language, and SOQL, Salesforce Object Query Language, have distinct purposes. SOSL is used for searching across multiple objects simultaneously, making it suitable for keyword-based searches across various object types. SOQL is used for querying specific objects with structured queries, providing more focused and targeted data retrieval. Question 51. How can you round a double to 2 decimal places in Apex? You can round a double to 2 decimal places in Apex using the setScale method. Here's an example code snippet. Decimal D equals 100 divided by 3. Double A N S equals D dot setScale 2. Question 52. What is the mandatory component when creating a user, role, or profile in Salesforce? When creating a user, role, or profile in Salesforce, the mandatory component is the user's profile. The profile determines the user's access and permissions within the organization, including what data they can view and modify. Question 53. In a master detail relationship in Salesforce, can you update child record fields using a workflow rule when the master record is updated? No, in a master detail relationship, you cannot directly update child record fields using a workflow rule when the master record is updated. Child record data is tightly linked to the master record, and changes to child records are typically made through modifications to the master record. You can use Process Builder and Flow to perform updates in such scenarios. Question 54. Can you change the organization-wide sharing default (OUD) settings for child records in a master detail relationship independently? No, you cannot change the organization-wide sharing default (OUD) settings for child records in a master detail relationship independently. The sharing settings for child records are inherited from the parent record, and they cannot be customized separately. The child's sharing settings are controlled by the parent record. Question 55. In profile settings, what is the difference between Modify All Data and Modify All? Modify All Data allows a user to create, edit, and delete all organization data, regardless of sharing settings. Modify All grants specific object permissions, read, create, add, delete, to the selected object. Question 56. If you want record-level access control, what should you use from the Salesforce security model? For record-level access control, you should use features like organization-wide defaults, sharing rules, role hierarchy, and manual sharing in the Salesforce security model. Question 57. If you want object-level access control, what should you use from the Salesforce security model? For object-level access control, you should use profiles in the Salesforce security model. Profiles define what a user can do with a specific object, such as read, create, edit, and delete. Question 58. In OWD, organization-wide sharing defaults, can you change the setting, grant access using hierarchies, for standard objects? You cannot change the grant access using hierarchies setting for standard objects. This setting is fixed for most standard objects and is not customizable. Question 59. What is mandatory while creating a user, role, or profile in Salesforce? When creating a user, role, or profile in Salesforce, it is mandatory to associate the user with a profile. The profile determines the user's access, permissions, and settings within the organization. Question 60. In case of a master detail relationship, can you update the field of the child record using a workflow rule when the master record is updated? If not, why? No, you cannot directly update the fields of a child record using a workflow rule when the master record is updated in a master detail relationship. This is because the child record's data is tightly linked to the master record, and changes to the child record should typically be made through updates to the master record. To achieve this, you can use Process Builder or Flow. Question 61. In case of a master detail relationship, can you update the field of the parent record using a workflow rule when the child record is updated? Yes, you can update the fields of the parent record using a workflow rule when the child record is updated in a master detail relationship. The master detail relationship allows you to use the child's changes to trigger actions or updates on the parent record. Question 62. While setting OWD, organization-wide sharing defaults, can we change, modify the setting of the child record in case of a master detail relationship? No, in a master detail relationship, you cannot independently change or modify the organization-wide sharing default settings for the child record. The child record's sharing settings are controlled by the parent record's OWD settings, and they are inherited from the parent. Question 63. If a user has only read-level access at the object level and no specific record access, can they change the record owner? Yes, a user can change the record owner even if they have only read-level access at the object level. This is possible due to the transfer record permission in their profile settings, which allows them to transfer ownership of a record to another user. Question 64. What is the need for a custom controller in Visualforce when everything can be done with the combination of a standard controller and extension class? There are a couple of key scenarios where a custom controller becomes necessary. Avoiding default sharing settings. When working with a standard controller and extension, sharing settings are applied by default. If you want to override these settings and perform operations without considering sharing rules, a custom controller, declared without sharing, is the only option. Non-standard object requirements. Sometimes, the functionality of a Visualforce page doesn't require any standard object or may require the interaction of multiple standard objects. In such cases, a custom controller allows you to implement custom logic without being tied to standard objects. Question 65. In which scenario is the share object, myCustomObject__share, not available, created for the custom object, myCustomObject? The myCustomObject__share object is not available or created for a custom object, myCustomObject, when the organization-wide default access level for that object is not set to the most permissive access level, which is public read/write. This share object is used for creating Apex-based sharing rules and only exists for custom objects with this access level setting. Question 66. How can you hide the App Setup menu from a user's setup page? To hide the App Setup menu from a user's setup page, you need to modify their profile settings. Specifically, you should remove their access to View Setup and Configuration in the profile settings. Question 67. When creating a new profile for a user, which existing profile should you copy? When creating a new profile for a user, it's generally recommended to copy from the standard user profile, especially if the new user is not going to be a system administrator. The standard user profile provides a good starting point for user profiles with typical access rights. Question 68. Who can run reports in Salesforce? Users who have the Run Report permission and have access to the specific report folder can run reports. This permission is required to execute, view, and interact with reports within the Salesforce platform.